Obviously, I have a map here. I've intentionally made it look a bit dated. I used the same methods that I showed in the images video to give it sort of that old retro feel. So I want to use this map on an old style website, right? Right now I'm looking at sort of the HTML2 time period, so early to mid 90s. With HTML2 there was a feature that came out where you could have an image map with actual locations on the map that were clickable, and depending on where you clicked, it would take you to different other places. And that was pretty cool at the time. Now with HTML3, they made some improvements to this, but, well, there's a little bit of an issue. So in HTML2, you could do this, but it was all server side. So it didn't happen in the browser, it didn't happen in, like, you know, the Safari or Firefox or Internet Explorer of then. It happened on the server. You would click, and the browser would tell the server where you clicked, and then the server would send information to your browser telling it where it was going to go next. It doesn't really work that way anymore. Well, actually, people don't really use a whole lot of image maps anymore, but you can still use them. We just use a different method now. In HTML 3.2, they added client-side server maps. What client-side means is that it happens only in the browser. So you write HTML code that, depending on where they click, the browser already knows where to go based on that HTML code. So it's not having to ask the server where to go and then the server redirects. Granted, I guess the end result is somewhat the same, because as soon as you click somewhere, your browser is now requesting the server to load up that new page, but it's just a little different in the way that it actually works. So trying to do the old method from HTML2 isn't really realistic, because the likelihood that you're going to find a server that will let you isn't very good. And in addition to that, the way that it worked from server to server could vary. So the way it looked on the page, the code on your HTML page was pretty simple, but getting it to work on the back end, getting it to work with the servers, that varied a lot. And so we can't really do that exactly, but we can use the HTML 3.2 version, and that's okay. Or at least I think it's okay. So here's the map. I've marked areas that I want to be clickable, and these are different places that Tim Berners-Lee spent part of his life in up to creating HTML. So he was born in London, he went to school, well, he went to college in Oxford, he had a few jobs in Dorset, and then of course Geneva, where CERN is, where he actually created HTML, with help of other people, of course. So first things first, I'm going to open TextEdit and just make a really simple page. So we'll start with a head element and close it out. And the title will be, I guess, Tim Berners-Lee Early Life. And we'll close the title tag, open the body tag, we close that, and then I guess a heading would be good, right? So we start a heading tag, close the heading. I'm going to make it the same as that. Maybe make one more heading, maybe a subheading. And this can just be called main page, I guess. And then we'll create the image element. So img src equals the name of the image file, so landoflee.gif. And if I save it, let's save it as index.html. So in a lot of the previous videos, I didn't really use index.html, but this is and quickly became the standard for sort of the main page of a site. So when you're making a main page for your website, this is typically what you want to call it, and this is typically what file the server will look for when someone types in your URL if they don't specify a specific .html file. So we'll save that, and whenever you're ready, computer. There it is. I don't see my graphics, so did I do something wrong? No, everything seems to be working, so that's good. I did make this a width of 600, because keep in mind the old resolution size back then would have been 640, so the site would have looked something kind of like this. So maybe below that, maybe I want to put a little bit of text. So open a paragraph element, close the paragraph elements, and then maybe we say something like, click the markers to learn about the early life of Tim Berners-Lee. Right. And if we reopen it, yeah, sure, that looks fine. Okay, so now how do we actually make these interact? Of course, I could add more to this, but that's not really the main focus here. So it works a little differently with client side than server side. We're not going to worry about server side because, like I said, it doesn't work anymore. Or good luck finding one that does. Once CSS comes out, there are ways that we can do this with CSS as well, but we're focusing on HTML right now because CSS didn't exist yet at this point in time. So first thing, let's make a little bit of white space just to make this more clear. We need to add a new attribute in there. It's an attribute we haven't talked about yet. And that attribute is useMap. And in quotes, it's going to equal something that we decide. So I'm going to call this maybe Lee map. It doesn't really matter what. You do need to put a hashtag or # in front of it, but you can call it whatever you want. Just make sure you're consistent later on so that way it knows what it's connecting to. Now we're going to create a whole new element. So let's make a little bit of space. And this is the map element. So I'll open it, I'll close it, and now we need to actually put some stuff in there. So the main attribute, or pretty much the only attribute that the map element needs, is a name. And this name needs to match whatever we used here. So Lee map. And basically what this is saying is it's telling this to reference a map by this name. So if they don't match, then it won't find it. So you need to make sure the two match because that's what's connecting the two. Now I've created this element, right? And it has an opening and a closing tag. And the reason for that is because we have to put stuff inside of it. So inside of here, we're going to define areas that are clickable. And obviously those will correspond to the markers I have on the map. There are 3 different shapes we can use. We can use like a circle, a rectangle, or a polygon that we define the points on. That's all that exists. There aren't triangles or stars or anything like that, although you could, I suppose, create them by defining the points of a polygon. So we define these areas with an actual tag or element called area. So I'm going to start with 3 since there are 3 different shapes for them. And then for each one, we can define the different attributes that go in that tag. So let's start with the rectangle because I think that's probably the easiest one to understand. It's just shape equals rect. And then we need a set of coordinates. And then we'll need our hypertext reference. So where will that link actually go? Now, understanding the coordinates and then actually figuring them out is a little bit of a 2-step process. So basically what you have to do is you have to figure out where that square is. So like if this is what we want clickable to go to a page called, I don't know, oxford.html, we would define the coordinates of this rectangle. So how do we do that? There's different ways. You could open up a graphics software, but actually if you have Firefox on your machine, you don't necessarily need it.